the island of Tenerife in the Canaries. Its beaches are a favorite haunt of sun-starved holidaymakers from all over Northern Europe. Way above these beaches, literally up in the clouds, is Tenerife's Los Rodeos Airport, now little used since it became the most notorious airport in the world. 1,000 people lost their lives here in accidents, much of it due to the fact that Los Rodeos is shrouded in clouds on most days. Sunday, March the 27th, 1977, was just such a day. Flying to the Canaries were two jumbo jets, Boeing 747s. Both were charter flights, one a Pan American plane full of tourists, the other a Dutch jet belonging to KLM Airlines. One of the many strange things about that day was that neither pilot had set out for Tenerife.
We were starting our descent for the approach and landing at Las Palmas, our original destination. And as we were doing that, we got a call from air traffic control to divert immediately to Tenerife.
A terrorist bomb on the next island had caused this small airport to suddenly become choked with planes. Bob Bragg was the co-pilot on the Pan Am Jumbo. It's the first time he's been back to Los Rodeos since that Sunday in 1977. 20 years later, bits of his plane are still all around.
When we landed here, the entire ramp was completely and totally congested. There were probably 20 to 30 airplanes that had also diverted and were parked here, which necessitated us having to go way down to the end here and park.
By now, there are 400 people who've been up all night, half the day before possibly, and they don't quite understand what's going on. And our information was certainly limited at that point. We really didn't know the circumstances or what had actually transpired. The facilities on board, I suppose by now, were a little, well, it was busy, let me put it that way, and everybody was restless.
The Dutch pilot, Captain van Zanten, was getting restless too. His plane had been parked alongside the Pan Am, and the American pilots could hear him constantly on the radio, anxious to be on his way before he ran out of flying hours.
He was very irritated about the situation, as I'm sure all of us were, because most of us had been flying all night long, and we were all anxious to get to our destination. Basically, about that time, he decided to start refueling. Concurrent with that, they opened up the airport at Las Palmas. So the engineer and I got out and walked and measured the wingtip clearance between the KLM 747 and our 747. And we found out that we were about 12 feet short of being able to get around him and taxi out. So we had to wait for the KLM airplane to refuel.
The two aircraft had been parked at the wrong end of the runway for takeoff. And with so many planes choking the airport, the only way they could get to the correct end was by taxiing up the runway itself. This simulation recreates the acknowledged facts of the accident. Air traffic control ordered the KLM to go first and wait when it got to the far end. The Pan Am would follow behind, but would turn off the runway about 3/4 of the way along to allow the KLM to take off.
By the time we got the clearance that we were going to leave and take off, people were very happy by then. They were quite elated. These were people who were going to meet a cruise ship in the Canary Islands and cruise around the Mediterranean. And a lot of them were senior citizens that had come from California.
As the Pan Am entered the runway in its turn, clouds began to roll down from the surrounding hills. The American pilots soon found themselves crawling through the dense mist looking for their turnoff. By now, the KLM plane had already reached the far end, turned, and was anxious to be on its way.
The tower called us and asked were we off the runway, and I said negative, we're still on the runway, but we will report clear of the runway. We looked up and we saw the KLM airplane's lights, and I immediately saw the lights shaking, and I said, I think he's moving. And then it was very obvious that he was moving. So I started yelling, "Get off, get off." And the captain turned the airplane, went to full power on the throttles. As we were turning, I looked back out of the right window and couldn't believe it, that he was doing what he was doing. And I'll never forget, I saw the rotating beacon underneath the belly of the airplane. I closed my eyes and ducked.